The moment my daughter-in-law smiled at me, I knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't her usual smile. This one was different, cold, almost victorious. I had called my son to ask about wedding plans. Simple question, innocent question, the kind of question any mother would ask. But what came next shattered everything I thought I knew about my own family. "Oh, Renata," Lena said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We already got married. Yesterday, actually." I froze. We only invited special people. Special people. Those 3 words hit me like a freight train, like someone had reached into my chest and crushed my heart with bare hands. Special people. I stood there in my living room, phone pressed against my ear, try to process what I had just heard. My legs felt like they might give out beneath me. For 3 years, 3 long years, I had paid their rent. Every single month. $500. Like clockwork. I had bought every piece of furniture in their apartment. The sofa they sat on, the bed they slept in, the table where they ate the food, I also helped provide. When their refrigerator was empty, I filled it. When emergencies happened, I covered them. When Lena needed money for personal expenses last month, I gave her $800 without blinking. $800. I now knew exactly where that money went. It went toward her wedding dress. The dress she wore when she married my son. The wedding I wasn't invited to. My hands started shaking. The phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I looked across the room at Max. My son, my only child. The boy I had raised alone after his father died. He couldn't even look at me. He sat on the sofa, my sofa, the one I bought, staring at the floor while his wife made herself comfortable next to him. "Mom," he finally said, his voice rehearsed hollow. It was intimate, very small, just us and the witnesses. Lies. I knew it was lies, because I had already seen the photos. Social media is cruel that way. It shows you exactly what people don't want you to see. I saw Lena's parents, smiling, proud, standing right next to the bride and groom. I saw her brothers and sisters, laughing, toasting with champagne. I saw the white dress, the flowers, the cake. I saw everything. Everything except myself, because I wasn't there. The mother of the groom wasn't at the wedding. Do you know what that feels like? To scroll through photos of your own son's wedding like you're a stranger looking in through a window? In my closet, there hung a pale pink dress. $200. I had picked it out weeks ago, imagining how nice I would look standing next to Max in his wedding photos. Photos that would never include me. New shoes sat in a box, unworn, tags still attached. I had set aside $1,000 as their wedding gift. I had cleaned my house from top to bottom, thinking maybe they would come celebrate with me afterward. I had called my sister Diana in Chicago to share the excitement. All of it, every single preparation, every hopeful thought, gone, crushed by 4 poisoned words. Only special people. That night, after they left, I sat alone in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I had counted bills for their expenses, the same table where I had written checks to cover their rent, the same chair where I had sat so many times, eating beans and rice, so I could afford to give them more. And I started to do the math. Rent, $500 a month for 36 months. That's $18,000. Food and supplies, about $200 a month. Another $7,000. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, anniversary surprises, $3,000 more. Medical emergencies, car loans, furniture, appliances, repairs. The numbers kept climbing. When I finished adding it all up, I stared at the paper in disbelief. $33,400. That was the price of my foolishness. $33,000 taken from my retirement, from the savings my late husband had left me, from money I had set aside penny by penny over decades of honest work. And what did I get in return? I got to be a stranger at my own son's wedding. I got to be treated like an ATM with feelings. I got to be told I wasn't special. Something changed inside me that night. Something I couldn't explain at first. It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just anger. It was deeper, colder, more permanent. For years, I had walked on eggshells around them, weighing every word, every gesture, every gift, hoping, always hoping, for a crumb of affection from my own son. I had been the perfect mother, the obliging mother-in-law, the silent provider who never protested when they treated me like I was invisible. But that phrase, only special people, awakened something that had been buried for far too long. I was done. The next morning, when my phone rang and I saw Lena's name on the screen, I didn't feel panic. I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. But what she was about to ask me would test every ounce of strength I had just discovered. Lena's voice was different now. Gone was the confident woman who had looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't special enough for her wedding. This voice trembled. This voice pleaded. This voice had the unmistakable tone of desperation. "Renata, the rent is overdue." I said nothing. "The landlord is pressuring us. He says if we don't pay this week, he'll kick us out." Still, I remained silent. "You forgot to make the transfer." There it was, the audacity that took my breath away. I forgot? As if paying their rent was my responsibility. As if financing their adult lives was my duty. As if the woman they had humiliated just days ago was supposed to pretend nothing had happened. I let the silence stretch between us. Let her feel the weight of it. For years, I had rushed to fill every silence with reassurance, with promises, with money. Not anymore. "Lena," I finally said, my voice calmer than I expected, "didn't I warn you that I only help special people?" The silence on the other end was so complete, I could hear my own heartbeat. For the first time in years, it wasn't me who was trembling. It was her. "Renata, I don't understand," she stammered. "We were always special to you. You're like a second mother to me." Lies. Beautiful. Practice lies wrapped in that sweet voice she only used when she needed something. The same voice she had used to ask me for money for the wedding dress I never saw her, where at a ceremony I was never invited to. The same voice she had used to convince me to give her $800 for personal expenses that went straight toward a wedding that excluded me. "Lena," I said slowly, "you told me only special people were invited to your wedding. I wasn't invited. So, clearly, I am not special to you. That's not what I meant." "What did you mean, then?" "Explain it to me." She couldn't, because there was no explanation that could erase those words. No amount of backpedaling that could undo the damage. "The rent, Renata, please. We need—" "What you need," I interrupted, "is to learn how to take care of yourselves. You are both grown adults. Figure it out." I hung up before she could respond, and for the first time in 3 years, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The phone rang again within minutes. Then again, and again. Max Lena. Max Lena. I watched their names flash across my screen, like a broken alarm clock. I didn't answer. Instead, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had signed so many checks for them, and I started planning. Not planning for them, planning for me. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in decades. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same tired eyes. Same wrinkles that told stories of years of giving without receiving. But there was something different in my gaze now. A hardness. A determination. I got dressed, grabbed my purse, and drove to the bank. The branch manager, Mr. Klein, saw me through the glass doors and waved. He knew me well. For 3 years. He had processed every single transfer I made to Max and Lena. He had watched my account drain month after month to fill theirs. "Mrs. Richter," he said warmly as I approached his desk, "what can I do for you today? I need to cancel all automatic transfers." Immediately, his eyes widened slightly. All of them. Every single one. Are you sure? These transfers have been active for years. Did something happen? His concern was genuine, more genuine than any interest my own son had shown me in months. What happened, Mr. Klein, is that I finally opened my eyes. He nodded slowly, then began typing. While he processed the cancellations, my phone started ringing again. Max, Lena. Unknown numbers. It was as if they had developed a sixth sense, a radar that detected when their money supply was in danger. I turned the phone off completely. Mrs. Richter, Mr. Klein said as he handed me the paperwork, I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I've watched you be incredibly generous with your family over the years. I just want to make sure you're not being pressured into making these changes. His words touched something deep inside me. This man, a banker who barely knew me beyond transactions, showed more genuine concern for my well-being than my own flesh and blood. I'm not being pressured, Mr. Klein, I replied. For the first time in years, I've stopped pressuring myself. When I walked out of that bank, I felt lighter than I had in a decade. My money was finally mine again. But I wasn't finished. There were more changes to make, more boundaries to build, more of my life to reclaim. I drove home, thinking about all the things I had sacrificed for Max and Lena, the trips I never took, the friends I had lost touch with, the hobbies I had abandoned. Every dollar I spent on myself had felt like a dollar stolen from their needs. But they weren't needs. They were wants. Endless wants from two adults who saw me as nothing more than a walking checkbook. When I pulled onto my street, my stomach dropped. 3 cars were parked in front of my house. Max's car, Lena's car, and a third one I didn't recognize. Through my windows, I could see movement inside. They were in my house. They had let themselves in. I had given them keys years ago, back when I trusted them, back when I believed they would one day take care of me the way I had taken care of them. My hands gripped the steering wheel. This was it, the first real confrontation of my new life. I took a deep breath, opened my car door, and walked toward the house. What I found inside would change everything. I opened my front door to a scene that will haunt me forever. Max sat on my sofa, head buried in his hands like a defeated man. Lena paced back and forth across my living room like a caged animal, her heels clicking against the floor I had paid to refinish. And there at my dining table sat a man I had never seen before. He was going through papers, my personal documents, bank statements, insurance forms, medical records, spread across my table like evidence in a crime scene. What is happening here? My voice came out louder than I intended. All 3 of them looked up at me. For a split second, they looked at me like I was the intruder. In my own house, Lena recovered first. She rushed toward me with that desperate urgency I had heard on the phone. Renata, thank God you're here. We need to talk. She gestured toward the stranger at my table. This is Mr. Fisher. He's from a law firm. We consulted him about your situation. My situation. The words hung in the air like poison. What situation? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I'm doing perfectly fine. Max finally lifted his head. His eyes that once belonged to an innocent little boy who called me the best mom in the world, now reflected nothing but financial panic. Mom, we went to the bank. They told us you canceled all the transfers. His voice cracked. Mr. Klein said you blocked our access to your accounts. We don't understand why you would do that. Mr. Fisher stood up, smoothing his expensive gray suit. He extended his hand with a smile that made my skin crawl. Mrs. Richter, I'm Dr. Fisher, a family law attorney. Your children are deeply concerned about your mental well-being. They've asked me to assess the situation. I didn't shake his hand. Instead, I walked directly to my dining table and began gathering my documents, the documents he had been reading without my permission. These are my private papers. I said firmly, you have no right to look at them without my consent. Mom. Max used that condescending tone he had perfected over the years. We're worried about you. Your behavior has been very strange lately. He stood up, spreading his hands like he was explaining something to a child. First, you cut us off financially without any explanation. Then you don't answer our calls. We think you might need professional help. There it was, the accusation wrapped in concern. Lena approached me, reaching for my hand with that fake tenderness she reserved for moments when she wanted something. Renata, honey, we know you're under a lot of stress. Maybe the loneliness is affecting you more than you think. She paused, tilting her head with practiced sympathy. At your age, episodes of confusion are completely normal. Confusion. The word echoed in my head like a warning bell. Now I understood exactly why they had brought the lawyer. This wasn't about helping me. This was about declaring me mentally incompetent. This was about taking control of my finances. This was about stealing everything I had left. The same woman who had told me I wasn't special enough for her wedding was now trying to paint me as a senile old woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. I am not confused, I said, my voice cut into the room like a blade. I am clearer than I have been in years. I pointed toward the door. And you are all going to leave my house. Right now. Mr. Fisher stepped forward, his professional mask firmly in place. Mrs. Richter, I understand you feel overwhelmed, but your children have a right to intervene if they believe your ability to make financial decisions is impaired. He pulled a folder from his briefcase. They've documented several concerning behaviors. Concerning behaviors. A laugh escaped my throat, harsh, bitter, almost cruel. Concerning behaviors? Like what? Deciding that my money belongs to me? Deciding not to finance the lives of two grown adults who treat me like garbage? Lena's face contorted. We never treated you badly. You're part of our family. Everything you have will belong to us one day anyway. She threw her hands up in frustration. We're just speeding up the process. The room went silent. There it was, the naked, unvarnished truth. Everything I have will belong to them one day anyway. In their minds, I was already dead. They were just collecting their inheritance early. It didn't matter if I had 70 years left or 70 days. To them, I was nothing more than an obstacle standing between them and my money. Get out, I said, pointing at the door. All three of you, out of my house. Now. Max stood up with the petulant expression of a child who wasn't getting his way. Mom, we can't just leave. We have obligations. The rent, the car payments, the credit card you co-signed. His voice rose with each word. You can't just cut us off overnight. Who says I can't? My voice thundered through the living room. For years, I paid rent that wasn't even in my name. I filled a refrigerator in a house where I wasn't welcome. I financed a life that clearly had no place for me. Mr. Fisher placed a document on my table with practice calm. Mrs. Richter, we prepared some paperwork that could facilitate this transition. A simple power of attorney that would allow Max and Lena to manage your finances more efficiently. He smiled that cold, professional smile. It's just temporary, until you feel better. I picked up the folder without opening it. Then I walked to my trash can and dropped it straight in. The only transition happening here, I said, is you three transitioning out my front door. Lena's fake tears started flowing. You can't do this to us. Renata, we were counting on you. We made plans based on your support. Plans based on my money. I replied, not on my well-being, not on my happiness, not on my company, just my money. I met her eyes without flinching. And now that I've decided my money is better spent on my own life, suddenly I'm a confused old woman who needs legal guardianship. The room fell silent. Max took a step toward me, but I stepped back. He was no longer the little boy who ran into my arms during thunderstorms. He was a 35-year-old man who saw his mother as nothing more than an obstacle to a comfortable life. Mom, he said in a voice meant to sound remorseful, we made mistakes. The wedding was a misunderstanding. Lena was nervous. I was under pressure. We can fix this. He reached for my hand. If you would just be reasonable again. Reasonable. The word tasted like poison. Being reasonable means continuing to pay for your life while you treat me like a stranger? Being reasonable means pretending it doesn't hurt that I wasn't my only son's wedding. Mr. Fisher began packing his papers. Mrs. Richter, this isn't over. Your family has legal options. If you're making irrational decisions due to mental health problems, a judge can determine you need guardianship. His words hit me like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was a real legal threat. They were going to try to have me declared incompetent, and they were willing to fight dirty to do it. But so was I. What they didn't know was that I had already made a phone call that morning. A phone call that would change everything. That night, I didn't sleep. But it wasn't sadness keeping me awake. It was adrenaline. The adrenaline of a woman who had finally decided to fight back. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, planning my next moves like a general preparing for war. If Max and Lena wanted a battle, I would give them one. But this would be a war fought with intelligence, not emotion. At 6 a.m, I was already dressed and ready. My first stop was the office of Attorney Heinrich Weber, a man I had met years ago when handling my husband's estate. Unlike Mr. Fisher, the shark Max and Lena had brought, Mr. Weber had an impeccable reputation. He specialized in one thing: protecting the rights of the elderly. When I sat down in his office and explained everything, the wedding, the humiliation, the money, the threats, his expression grew darker with every word. Mrs. Richter, he said when I finished, what your children attempted yesterday is more common than you might think. He leaned forward, his voice grave. It's called elder financial abuse, and is a federal crime. The words hit me with unexpected force. A crime, what they had done to me, what they were still trying to do, was criminal. The fact that they entered your home without permission and reviewed your private documents, Mr. Weber continued, also constitutes a serious violation of your rights. His words both calmed and terrified me. Calmed me because they confirmed I wasn't crazy. What had happened was real. It was wrong. It was abuse. Terrified me because I realized the situation was far more serious than I had imagined. We need to document everything, Mr. Weber said, pulling out a notepad. Every transfer, every gift, every time they pressured you for money, every single instance. He paused. We're also going to change your will immediately. We need to protect your assets from any future manipulation attempts. For 3 hours, we went through my financial records together. Every check, every transfer, every receipt I had saved. When Mr. Weber saw the final number, he let out a low whistle. $33,400 in 3 years. He shook his head slowly. Mrs. Richter, with this money, you could have lived comfortably. You could have traveled, enjoyed your retirement. Instead, you completely financed the lives of 2 adults who didn't respect you enough to invite you to their wedding. Hearing it from someone else made it painfully real. I had been a fool, a loving, generous, blindly devoted fool. But that woman was gone now. When I left Mr. Weber's office, I had a complete plan. First, change every lock on my house. Second, install a security system with cameras. Third, open new bank accounts at a different bank, one where Max and Lena had no connections. Fourth, start living the life I had postponed for far too long. My next stop was a hardware store. The owner, Mr. Summer, had known me for years. I was always there buying things to fix problems in Max and Lena's apartment. Mrs. Richter, he called out when he saw me, what brings you in today? Another emergency with your son's place. No, Mr. Summer. This time it's for my own house. I walked up to the counter with determination. I need to change all my locks, and I want the best quality you have. He looked surprised but didn't ask questions. While I was selecting the locks, his son, Ethan, walked by. Ethan installed security systems. It felt like Providence. Ethan, I said, I also need surveillance cameras. The complete system. Price is not an issue. He nodded. clearly sensing the urgency in my voice. While they prepared everything for installation, the next day, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered, knowing exactly who it would be. "Renata, it's Lena. Please don't hang up." She had called from someone else's phone because I had blocked her number after the confrontation. "We need to talk like civilized adults," she continued. I said nothing. "Listen, I understand you're upset about the wedding. It was a mistake. Max and I have talked about it, and we want to make it up to you." Her voice turned sweet, almost nostalgic. "How about we have a special dinner? To celebrate our marriage with you, we can do it at your house. Cook together like we used to." The manipulation was so transparent, I almost laughed. "Lena," I said flatly, "how much rent do you owe exactly?" Silence. Well, it's 2 months. $1,000 total." She paused. "But that's not why I'm calling. Renata, we really miss you in our lives." "Do you miss me? Or do you miss my money?" Another silence. Then, something I didn't expect. "Both," she admitted. "Renata, I won't lie to you. Yes, we need your financial help. But we love you too. You're important to us." "If I'm so important," I replied, "why wasn't I important enough to be at your wedding? Why am I only important enough to get phone calls that ask for money?" I let the question hang in the air. "When was the last time you called just to ask how I was doing?" We both knew the answer. Never. "Lena, I'm only going to explain this once. For 3 years, you treated me like an ATM with feelings. You used me. You ignored me. You humiliated me. And finally, you insulted me in the worst way possible." My voice didn't waver. "Now that the money has stopped, you suddenly discover you love me. But it's too late. Renata, please." "There is no please. You made your choice when you decided I wasn't special enough for your wedding. Now I'm making mine." I hung up and turned off my phone completely. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I went to the beauty salon. I had always canceled appointments because Max or Lena needed something urgent, or because the money I had set aside for myself always became their emergency fund. "Mrs. Richter," my hairstylist Cynthia exclaimed. "What a surprise. I thought you had forgotten about us." "I didn't forget you, Cynthia. I just forgot that I deserved to be pampered too. I treated myself to everything. Cut, color, manicure, pedicure. For the first time in years, I spent money on myself without guilt." When Cynthia finished, she stepped back and smiled. "Mrs. Richter, you look beautiful. But more than that," she tilted her head, "you look free. Did something good happen?" "Yes, Cynthia. I finally learned to say no." When I returned home that evening, feeling lighter than I had in years, I noticed something that made my heart skip. There was someone sitting on my porch steps. A woman I had never spoken to before. A woman who would become one of the most important people in my new life. And she had a story that would change everything I thought I knew about my situation. The woman on my porch steps looked to be about my age. Silver hair, kind eyes, a warm smile that seemed genuine in a way I hadn't experienced in far too long. "Mrs. Richter?" she asked as I approached. "Yes, that's me. Can I help you?" "I'm Eleanor Brooks. I live next door." She gestured toward the house beside mine. "We've been neighbors for years, but we've never really had a chance to talk." I realized with a pang of guilt that she was right. I had been so consumed with Max and Lena's endless needs that I had never taken time to know the people living right beside me. Eleanor's expression shifted to concern. "Yesterday, I heard very loud voices coming from your house. A lot of yelling. It worried me." She stood up, brushing off her skirt. "I just wanted to make sure you're okay." Her sincere concern touched something deep inside me. Here was a stranger, a woman I had never spoken to, showing more genuine care for my well-being than my own son had shown in years. "Would you like to come in?" I heard myself say. "I'll make us some coffee, and I'll tell you a story you won't believe." over steaming cups of coffee. I told Eleanor everything: the secret wedding, the humiliation, the $33,000, the visit with the lawyer, my decision to cut off all funding, the threats. Eleanor listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her eyes growing more understanding with each detail. When I finally finished, her eyes glistened with tears. "Mrs. Richter," she said softly, "you did the right thing." She reached across the table and took my hand. I went through something very similar with my daughter 5 years ago. My heart stopped. "You did?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "I also thought it was my duty to finance her adult life. I also believed she wouldn't love me if I didn't give her money." She paused, collecting herself. "I was paying for everything: her apartment, her car, her vacations, her shopping trips. And do you know when she called me?" I shook my head. "Only when she needed something. Never just to talk. Never just to check on me." It was like looking into a mirror. "What happened?" I asked. "What did you do?" "I cut off the money. Completely. Just like you did." Eleanor's voice grew stronger. "At first it was terrible. My daughter threatened me. She tried to make me feel guilty. She told everyone I was a terrible mother. She even tried to turn my grandchildren against me." My stomach clenched. This was exactly what I feared. But then, Eleanor continued, something amazing happened. She smiled, a real, genuine smile. After about 6 months of silence, my daughter called me, and for the first time in years, she wasn't calling to ask for money. What did she want? She wanted to apologize. Genuinely apologize. She said that losing my financial support had forced her to look at herself, really look at herself for the first time. Eleanor squeezed my hand. She got a job. Her husband started working harder. They learned to live within their means. And more importantly, they learned that I was a person, not a resource. And now, I asked, almost afraid to hope, now we have a real relationship, based on love, not on money. She calls me every week just to talk. She visits because she wants to see me, not because she needs something. Her words planted a tiny seed of hope in my heart. "Do you think Max and Lena will ever understand?" I whispered. Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Maybe yes, maybe no," she answered honestly. "But here's what I learned, Mrs. Richter. That's no longer your responsibility." She leaned forward. "Your responsibility now is to live your own life, to protect yourself, to find happiness that doesn't depend on people who have shown you exactly who they are." That night, for the first time in 3 years, I went to bed without worrying. Not about whether Max and Lena had money for rent. Not about whether they had food in their refrigerator. Not about their problems, their needs, their endless emergencies. I went to bed thinking about myself, my plans, my future, my life, and I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, Ethan and Mr. Summer arrived at 8 o'clock sharp to change the locks and install the security system. While they worked, my phone buzzed constantly with calls from unknown numbers. Lena was still trying to reach me from different phones. But I had developed a new skill, the ability to completely ignore calls that didn't serve me. "Mrs. Richter," Ethan said as he finished installing the cameras, "this system will give you complete peace of mind. You can see from your phone who's approaching your house, even when you're not home." He handed me a tablet showing the different camera views. And if anyone tries to break in without permission, the system automatically alerts the police. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was installing a security system to protect myself from my own son. But the pain of that realization had dulled. This was simply a practical measure to maintain my newfound peace. That afternoon, I did something I had postponed for far too long. I called my sister Diana in Chicago. We had lost touch over the years. Every time we spoke, our conversations had become nothing more than reports about Max and Lena, how much I was helping them, how proud I was to support them, how generous I was being. I now realize our conversations had become financial updates disguised as family news. Renata, Diana answered, surprised. Sister, how are you? We haven't talked in months. I'm good, Diana. Better than good, actually. I'm calling because I've finally come to my senses. I told her everything. When I finished, her response shocked me. Renata, sister, it was about time. She let out a long sigh. Every time we spoke, it broke my heart to hear you brag about how much money you were giving them, as if love could be measured in dollars. You never said anything. I whispered. I wanted to, so many times, but I didn't know how. Diana paused. There's something else, Renata, something I wanted to tell you for years. My heart pounded. What is it? Max never spoke lovingly about you. Not once. At family gatherings, it was always my mom helped me with this or my mom bought me that. But never I love my mom or I miss my mom. Her voice grew heavy. It was like you were a service provider, not a person. The truth cut deep, but it was a necessary wound. And Lena, Diana continued. She always talked about you in the future tense. What do you mean? She would say things like, when Renata is no longer here, we can remodel our house. Or, when we inherit, we'll invest in a business. Diana's voice cracked. They weren't just waiting for your money, Renata. They were waiting for you to die. The room spun around me. While I had spent years trying to make them happy, they had been planning their future, without me in it. I wasn't just an ATM to them. I was a temporary obstacle, an obstacle they were growing impatient with. After I hung up the phone, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I had just learned. But I wouldn't have long to absorb it, because 3 days later, something happened that proved just how far Max and Lena were willing to go. Something that would force me to fight for not just my money, but my very freedom. 3 days passed in relative peace. I had started painting again. Something I loved before I became Max and Lena's personal finance department. I set up an easel by the window where the morning light was perfect, and I spent hours creating something beautiful just for myself. Eleanor visited often. We had coffee together. We talked about everything except my problems. It felt normal. It felt healthy. It felt like what life was supposed to be. But I should have known the calm wouldn't last. On Thursday morning, while I was painting a vase of sunflowers, my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera on my tablet. A habit I had developed quickly. What I saw made my blood run cold. A young woman stood at my door, well-dressed, professional. She carried a folder and wore a smile that seemed practiced rather than genuine. I didn't recognize her, but something about her posture, her confidence, told me this wasn't a social visit. I opened the door cautiously. "Good morning," she said, her voice crisp and official. "Mrs. Renata Richter?" "Yes, that's me. I'm Mrs. Schmidt. I'm a social investigator from the Office of Senior Services." She pulled out an official-looking ID badge. "We receive a report that you may be in an at-risk situation. I'm here to conduct a wellness check." My heart stopped. Max and Lena had escalated. This was no longer just threats from private lawyers. They had involved the government. "May I see your identification again?" I asked, forcing my voice to remain calm. She handed me her badge. It looked legitimate. "May I come inside to speak with you?" Mrs. Schmidt asked. I knew that refusing would make me look like I had something to hide, so I let her in. She sat down in my living room, the same spot where Mr. Fisher had sat days earlier, and opened her folder. "Mrs. Richter," she began, "we received reports indicating that you've shown significant changes in your financial behavior, that you've cut off communication with your family, that you've exhibited signs of paranoia by installing unnecessary security systems." She looked up at me. "We were also informed that you refused medical and legal assistance from your loved ones." Every word was carefully chosen. Every phrase designed to make me sound like a mentally disturbed old woman. I recognized Lena's fingerprints all over this. She had always been skilled at twisting words to get what she wanted. "Mrs. Schmidt," I said with all the dignity I could summon, "I would like to call my lawyer before answering any questions." Her expression flickered with surprise. "Ma'am, this isn't a legal interrogation. It's simply a wellness check. If you have nothing to hide, speaking with me shouldn't be a problem." That phrase, "if you have nothing to hide," made my blood boil. It was the logic of abusers, the justification for invasion, the excuse for violation. "I'm calling my lawyer," I repeated firmly. "You're welcome to wait here, or you can come back another time. But I will not answer questions without legal representation present." I picked up my phone and called Mr. Weber. He arrived within 20 minutes. When he walked in and saw the social worker, his expression hardened. "Mrs. Schmidt," he said after examining her credentials, "I certainly hope you have a court order authorizing this visit, because my client is under my legal representation, and any unauthorized investigation constitutes harassment." Mrs. Schmidt's confidence wavered. "Sir, we received reports from concerned family members regarding this woman's well-being. It's our duty to investigate." "What family?" Mr. Weber asked sharply. "The same family that attempted to have her sign a power of attorney without representation? The same family that entered her home without permission and searched her private documents? The same family that excluded her from important events while living off her money?" He opened his briefcase and placed a thick folder on my coffee table. "I have complete documentation of the financial and emotional abuse my client has endured. $33,400 extracted from her accounts over 3 years. Systematic social exclusion. Emotional blackmail." His voice grew stern. "If anyone should be investigated here, it is not my client." Mrs. Schmidt reviewed the documents with visible discomfort. It was clear the information she had been given did not match the reality before her. "Mrs. Richter," she said finally, "can you explain why you so abruptly stopped financial support for your son?" "Because I finally realized they were using me," I answered simply. "Because I understood that to them, I wasn't a mother, I was a bank account. Because I was tired of financing the lives of people who saw me as an obstacle to their inheritance." Mrs. Schmidt shifted in her seat. "But don't you feel it's your responsibility to help your family?" The question enraged me. "Mrs. Schmidt, my responsibility as a mother was to raise my son until he became an adult, to educate him, to give him the tools to be independent." I met her gaze without flinching. "My son is 35 years old. He is married. He is perfectly capable of supporting himself. Financing his adult life is not my responsibility. It's a choice, and I have chosen not to do it anymore." Mr. Weber interjected smoothly. "Mrs. Schmidt, would you consider it normal for a 35-year-old adult to be unable to pay his own rent without help from a 71-year-old mother?" She didn't answer. Mr. Weber continued his questioning. "Mrs. Richter, do you manage your own finances completely?" "Yes. I can show you my bank statements, my investments, my tax payments. Everything is current and in perfect order." "Do you live independently?" "As you can see, I keep my house clean. I take care of myself physically. I drive my own car. I maintain healthy social relationships with my neighbors. Do you take any medications?" "Just vitamins and occasional aspirin. I have no medical conditions requiring prescription medication." Mr. Weber turned to Mrs. Schmidt. "My client recently underwent comprehensive medical examinations as part of our legal preparations. She is in perfect mental and physical condition. I have the documentation here if you'd like to review it." Mrs. Schmidt closed her folder slowly. "Mrs. Richter," she said, "based on this conversation and the documentation I've reviewed, I see no indication that you are at risk or in need of intervention." She stood up. "I will be closing this case." After she left, Mr. Weber and I sat in silence for a long moment. "Renata," he finally said, "this is going to continue to escalate. Max and Lena are spending money they don't have on lawyers, doctors, and investigators, all to try to have you declared incompetent. What does that tell you? I asked. It tells me they're desperate. They've lost their income source, and they're willing to do anything to get it back. What else can they do? Mr. Weber's expression grew grave. They can file a formal lawsuit for mental incompetence, take it to family court, request that a judge assign them guardianship over you. My stomach dropped. Could they win? It's expensive. It's difficult. But if they find a sympathetic judge and a psychiatrist willing to testify in their favor, he paused, they could potentially take control of your finances, your property, your life. The thought terrified me beyond words. But we have solid evidence, Mr. Weber continued firmly. Evidence that you're completely competent. Evidence that their motivation is greed, not genuine concern. He placed his hand on my shoulder. We're going to fight this, Renata, and we're going to win. That evening, Eleanor came over with a surprise. I've invited some friends from my garden club, she said with a knowing smile. Women who have been through similar situations. I thought you might want to meet them. I wasn't sure I was ready for company. But what happened that night would give me strength I didn't know I needed, because what these women shared would show me I wasn't alone. And what they revealed about their own battles would prepare me for the war that was about to come. That evening, 5 women gathered in my living room. Eleanor introduced them one by one. Renata, these are my friends. Cynthia, you already know from the salon. And this is Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda. They range in age from their 60s to their 80s. Each carried herself with the quiet dignity of someone who had survived battles that others couldn't see. We've all been through similar situations, Eleanor explained. Family members who saw us as nothing more than sources of money. We call ourselves the survivors. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. We sat together, drinking tea, and one by one, they shared their stories. Maria went first. My brother, she said, shaking her head. For 15 years, I supported him. Paid his bills, bailed him out of debt, lent him money he never paid back. She set down her teacup. When I finally said no, he told everyone in our family that I had become selfish and cold. He turned my own nieces and nephews against me. What happened? I asked. I lost half my family, but I gained my self-respect. Her words hung heavy in the air. Carmen spoke next. My daughter, she said quietly, my only child. I gave her everything. A house, a car, money for vacations. I even paid for her wedding, a wedding where she barely acknowledged me in her speech. She laughed bitterly. When I stopped funding her lifestyle, she told me I was dead to her. She didn't speak to me for 2 years. And now she has a job, a real job. Her husband works too. They learn that life doesn't hand you things for free. Carmen smiled sadly. She calls sometimes. We're rebuilding, slowly. But at least now when she calls, it's because she wants to talk, not because she needs a check. Then Alfreda spoke. At 80 years old, she was the oldest in the group. Her white hair was perfectly styled, and her eyes sparkled with hard-won wisdom. My grandchildren, she said, 3 of them. I raised them after their mother. My daughter passed away. I gave them everything I had. She paused. When they turned 18, each of them started treating me like I owed them something, like my entire purpose was to fund their lives. What did they do? I asked. They tried exactly what your son is trying. They hired a lawyer, filed papers saying I was mentally unfit. My heart raced. What happened? I fought them, hired my own lawyer, spent thousands of dollars defending myself in court. Alfreda's voice grew strong. I won. The judge saw right through their scheme. And do you know what the best part was? I shook my head. Having to earn their own money taught them more than all the checks I ever wrote. 2 of them came back years later, genuinely apologetic. They understood finally what they had done. And the third, I asked. Alfreda's face grew somber. The third never came back. And that's something I had to learn to accept. Not everyone who shares your blood shares your values. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. Not everyone who shares your blood shares your values. I had to let that sink in. The conversation continued for hours. Each woman shared advice, strategies, and most importantly, hope. Documentation is everything, Maria emphasized. Keep records of every interaction, every phone call, every threat, every manipulation attempt. Don't engage emotionally, Carmen added. That's what they want. They want you to feel guilty, to feel like you're the villain. Stay calm, stay focused, and build your support system, Eleanor said, gesturing around the room. Surround yourself with people who see you for who you really are, not what you can give them. As the evening wound down, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Belonging. These women understood me in ways that Max and Lena never had. They had walked the same painful path. They had emerged stronger. What hurts me most, I confess, my voice breaking, isn't the money I lost. It's realizing that the love I thought I had was never real. Alfreda reached over and took my hand. Renata, my dear, true love cannot be bought or sold. If you had to pay for it, it was never real. Tears streamed down my face. You know what I discovered? I said, loneliness surrounded by people who don't love you is worse than being alone. At least now, when I'm alone, I'm in good company. Everyone laughed, a warm, understanding laugh, and we toasted to our newfound wisdom. After they left, I sat alone in my garden, looking up at the stars. They seemed brighter than ever before. Or perhaps I was finally seeing them with clearer eyes. For the first time in my adult life, I had no financial obligations to anyone except myself. I could travel when I wanted. I could spend money on things that brought me joy. I could donate to causes I cared about. I could invest in my own future instead of funding someone else's present. Freedom tasted like hope, and for the first time in years, I was excited to plan my future. But that peace would be short-lived, because 1 month later, everything changed. It was a Tuesday morning when Mr. Weber arrived at my door with an expression that made my blood freeze. Renata, he said gravely, we need to talk. Now. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. Max and Lena have filed a formal lawsuit in family court. They're requesting that a judge declare you mentally incompetent and assign them as your legal guardians. The words hit me like a physical blow. I knew it was coming. I had prepared for it. But hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. They've submitted evidence, Mr. Weber continued. Witness statements, medical opinions, documentation of what they're calling erratic behavior. What kind of evidence? I demanded 3 witnesses who claim you've been acting strangely. Unpaid medical bills they say you've ignored. Medications they claim you've been hoarding. That's all lies. I exclaimed. I don't have unpaid bills. I don't hoard medication. I know, Mr. Weber said calmly, but they fabricated convincing paperwork. They also have a statement from a psychiatrist, a Dr. Lehman, who claims your refusal to cooperate with psychiatric evaluation indicates mental decline. The manipulation was diabolical. They had twisted my refusal to undergo an unnecessary, invasive examination into proof that I was mentally ill. They had weaponized my instinct to protect myself. Who are the 3 witnesses? I asked. Mr. Weber consulted his notes. Lena, of course, your neighbor, Mr. Davis, and someone named Mr. Green, your pharmacist. Mr. Davis was the unpleasant neighbor across the street who complained whenever my friends parked near his house. But Mr. Green, my pharmacist, I didn't understand. I need to talk to Mr. Green, I said firmly. Something isn't right. That afternoon, we drove to the pharmacy together. Mr. Green saw me coming and immediately looked nervous. Mrs. Richter, he said, fidgeting behind the counter. Good to see you. Mr. Green, I've been told you signed a statement saying I show erratic behavior regarding my medications. His face turned crimson. "Mrs. Richter, your daughter-in-law came in a few weeks ago asking about your prescriptions. She said she was worried because you've been acting strange. And what did you tell her?" "I explained that you only buy vitamins and occasional aspirin, that you don't have any regular prescriptions." He wiped his brow nervously. "But she kept insisting this proved you weren't taking proper care of your health." Mr. Weber stepped forward. "Mr. Green, did you sign any documents?" The pharmacist's face fell. She brought a form. Said it was confirming my observations about Mrs. Richter's medication purchases. I thought it was for insurance purposes or something. I didn't know it was for a lawsuit. My own pharmacist had been tricked. Lena had manipulated an innocent man into signing something he didn't fully understand. Her deception knew no limits. "Mr. Green," I said, "I need you to write a statement explaining exactly what happened. Clarify that I have no medication problems whatsoever." "Of course, Mrs. Richter. I'm so terribly sorry about this misunderstanding." After the pharmacy, we confronted Mr. Davis. When he answered his door, his expression was hostile. "What do you want?" "Mr. Davis," Mr. Weber said, "I understand you signed a statement about my client's behavior." "That's right," he sneered. "That woman has been acting crazy for weeks." "Can you be more specific about what behaviors you observed?" "Installing cameras like she lives in a war zone. Strangers coming and going at all hours. Screaming at her family in the street like a lunatic." I realized immediately what had happened. He had taken everything out of context. The cameras were for protection. The strangers were my new friends. The screaming was me defending my home from Max and Lena's invasions. "Mr. Davis," I said calmly, "do you know why I installed those cameras?" "Don't know. Don't care. To protect myself from my son and daughter-in-law, who broke into my house without permission and threatened me." He scoffed. Sounds like something a crazy person would say. There was no reasoning with him. His statement was based on surface observations, maliciously interpreted. But I now understood exactly what we were up against. A carefully constructed web of lies designed to steal my freedom. The trial date was set for 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare for the fight of my life. 3 weeks to prove I wasn't crazy. 3 weeks to expose the truth. And I was ready. The 3 weeks before the trial were the most intense of my entire life. Every day, Mr. Weber and I prepared. We gathered evidence. We interviewed witnesses. We built our case piece by piece. But it wasn't just legal preparation. It was emotional preparation. I had to accept something I had been avoiding for too long. My son didn't love me. Not the way a son should love his mother. Not unconditionally. Not genuinely. To him, I was a means to an end. A stepping stone to a comfortable life. An obstacle to his inheritance. Accepting this truth was like mourning a death. Because in many ways, the son I thought I had was already gone. Maybe he never existed at all. Maybe I had created him in my imagination. A loving boy who would grow into a loving man, who would one day take care of me the way I had taken care of him. But reality told a different story. And I had to face that reality head on. The night before the trial, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. 35 years of motherhood. $33,000 of wasted generosity. 3 years of being treated like an ATM. 1 humiliating exclusion from my son's wedding. And now this, a courtroom battle for my own freedom. At 5 a.m., I gave up on sleep and got out of bed. I took a long shower. I put on my best black suit, the one I had bought years ago for my husband's funeral. It seemed fitting somehow. I looked at myself in the mirror. Same tired eyes. Same wrinkles telling stories of a lifetime of giving. But there was something else now. Steel, determination, the unshakable resolve of a woman who refused to be destroyed. Mr. Weber picked me up at 8 o'clock. "How are you feeling?" he asked as we drove to the courthouse. "Terrified," I admitted, "but ready." Remember what we discussed. Stay calm. Answer only what's asked. Don't let their lawyer provoke you into an emotional reaction. What if the judge believed them? I asked, voicing my deepest fear. Judge Miller has a reputation for being fair, Mr. Weber reassured me. He's seen cases like this before. He knows how to spot manipulation. And if he doesn't, Mr. Weber was quiet for a moment. Then we appeal. We fight. We don't give up. His words gave me strength. When we arrived at the courthouse, my heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The hallway was crowded with people. Lawyers, plaintiffs, defendants, all waiting for their moment of judgment. And there, at the end of the corridor, I saw them. Max, Lena. Max wore a new suit, one I had never seen before. Probably bought specifically for this occasion. Probably bought with money they didn't have. Lena was dressed in black, as if attending a funeral. Maybe she was. The funeral of our relationship. When our eyes met, Max quickly looked away. But Lena held my gaze with a coldness that confirmed everything. To her, this was just business. I was nothing more than a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be removed, a bank account to be accessed. Their lawyer, Dr. Fisher, stood beside them, confident, polished, the kind of man who had won cases like this before. My stomach churned with fear, but I straightened my spine and walked into the courtroom with my head held high. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, dark with paneling, fluorescent lights, the faint smell of old paper and anxiety. Judge Miller sat at the front, a man in his 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. We took our seats. Max and Lena sat across the aisle with their lawyer. Mr. Weber sat beside me, his folder of evidence ready. All rise, the bailiff announced. And so it began. Dr. Fisher delivered his opening statement with practiced eloquence. Your Honor, we are here today out of deep concern for Mrs. Renata Richter's well-being. Over the past several months, she has exhibited alarming changes in behavior that indicate significant mental decline. He paced slowly in front of the judge. She has abruptly cut off all financial support to her family, support that has been consistent for years, without any rational explanation. She has installed extensive security systems driven by paranoia. She has isolated herself from loved ones and surrounded herself with strangers who appear to be taking advantage of her vulnerable state. He paused for effect. We are not here to punish Mrs. Richter. We are here to protect her, from herself and from those who would exploit her confusion for their own gain. Every word was designed to make me sound like a helpless, demented old woman. Every phrase twisted reality into a weapon against me. When it was Mr. Weber's turn, he stood calmly. Your Honor, what we will demonstrate today is not a case of mental incompetence. It is a case of elder financial abuse. He let those words hang in the air. For 3 years, my client provided over $33,000 to her adult son and daughter-in-law. She paid their rent. She bought their furniture. She funded their lifestyle. She did this out of love, a mother's unconditional love for her child. He walked toward the judge. And how was that love repaid? By exclusion, by humiliation, by being told she wasn't special enough to attend her own son's wedding, by having her private documents searched without consent, by being threatened with legal action when she finally chose to stop being exploited. He turned to face Max and Lena. The plaintiffs are not concerned about Mrs. Richter's mental health. They are concerned about their income. Their comfortable life was funded entirely by my client. When she chose to reclaim her independence, they responded with manipulation, lies, and now this lawsuit. He returned to our table. The evidence will show that Mrs. Renata Richter is not only mentally competent, but exceptionally so. The only erratic behavior she has exhibited is the behavior of a woman who finally learned to say no. Judge Miller nodded slowly. Call your first witness. Dr. Fisher called Lena to the stand. She walked forward with practiced grace, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Tears I now recognize as completely manufactured. Mrs. Schuster, Dr. Fisher began gently. Can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Renata has always been like a second mother to me, Lena said, her voice trembling perfectly. We've been so close for years. That's why watching her decline has been absolutely devastating. Can you describe some of the changes you've observed? Lena nodded, squeezing her tissue. She became withdrawn. Hostile. Paranoid. She started installing cameras everywhere like she was living in some kind of fortress. She stopped answering our calls. She cut us off financially without any explanation. A tear rolled down her cheek. We've tried so hard to help her, but she pushes us away. We just want to make sure she's taken care of properly. The performance was Oscar-worthy. If I hadn't lived through her manipulation myself, I might have believed every word. But Mr. Weber was ready when it was his turn to cross-examine. He approached the witness stand with calm precision. Mrs. Schuster, you testified that you and my client were so close. Is that correct? Yes, Lena nodded. Can you tell the court the last time you called my client without asking her for money? Lena hesitated. Well, we talked about many things. A specific date, please. I don't remember exact dates. Is it true that you and your husband were married without inviting my client to the ceremony? Lena's face tightened. It was a very small, intimate wedding. Is it true that when my client inquired about the wedding, you told her, and I quote, that you only invited special people? The courtroom went silent. Lena's composure cracked slightly. Those words were taken out of context. What would be the proper context for telling your mother-in-law that she wasn't a special person? Lena couldn't answer. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Mr. Weber pressed on. Mrs. Schuster, isn't it true that my client paid your rent for 3 consecutive years? That she bought your furniture? That she gave you $800 just weeks before your wedding? Money that went toward your wedding dress. She offered to help. And isn't it true that after she stopped providing financial support, you and your husband attempted to have her sign a power of attorney, giving you control over her finances? We were trying to help her. By having a stranger rifle through her private documents without her consent, Lena's tears stopped flowing. Her mask was slipping. We were concerned about her mental state. Were you concerned? Or were you concerned about losing your income? Objection! Dr. Fisher shouted. Counsel is badgering the witness. Withdrawn, Mr. Weber said calmly. But the damage was done. The judge had seen Lena's composure shatter. He had watched her rehearsed story fall apart under questioning. And when she stepped down from the witness stand, I could see the fear in her eyes. The fear of someone who had been caught. But the trial was far from over. Because Max was next. And what he would say on that stand would break my heart in ways I never imagined possible. Max walked to the witness stand like a man carrying an invisible weight. He wouldn't look at me. Not once. As he raised his hand to swear on the Bible, I studied his face. The face I had watched grow from infant to boy to man. The face I had kissed goodnight for 18 years. The face I had sacrificed everything for. Now, that face was about to testify against me. Dr. Fisher approached him with practiced sympathy. Mr. Richter, I know this is difficult. Can you describe your relationship with your mother? Max cleared his throat. My mom has always been generous. Very generous. She helped us a lot over the years. And recently? Have you noticed any changes in her behavior? Max nodded slowly. She's become different, erratic. She stopped helping us without any explanation. She won't return our calls. She surrounded herself with strangers who I think are taking advantage of her. Can you give specific examples of concerning behavior? She installed all these security cameras like she's living in a prison. She blocked our numbers. She hired a lawyer to keep us away from her. Max finally glanced in my direction. It's like she'd become a completely different person, not the mother I grew up with. Dr. Fisher nodded sympathetically. And you're here today because you're worried about her? Of course. She's my mother. I love her. I just want to make sure she's okay. The words should have touched me. Once upon a time, they would have, but I had learned to recognize the hollow sound of rehearsed lines. When Mr. Weber stood cross-examined, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. "Mr. Richter," he began, "you testified that your mother has always been generous. Can you quantify that generosity?" Max shifted uncomfortably. "I don't have exact numbers." "Does $33,400 sound approximately correct?" Max's jaw tightened. "Maybe. I guess. Over 3 years, your mother paid your rent, bought your furniture, filled your refrigerator, covered your emergencies. Is that accurate?" "She offered to help." "Did she offer, or did you and your wife repeatedly ask for assistance?" Silence. "Mr. Richter, how old are you?" 35. "And you're employed?" "I work part-time." "Part-time. And your wife? Does she work?" "She's between jobs." "For how long has she been between jobs?" Max hesitated. "A few years." "A few years. So for several years, 2 able-bodied adults in their 30s have relied entirely on a 71-year-old widow to pay their bills." "Objection!" Dr. Fisher called out. "Counsel is characterizing." "Overruled," Judge Miller said firmly. "The witness will answer." Max's face reddened. "We were going through a difficult time. Mom wanted to help." "Did she want to help? Or did she feel obligated to help because you made her feel that her love was conditional on her financial support?" Max's composure cracked. "That's not fair." "What's not fair, Mr. Richter, is a 35-year-old man trying to have his elderly mother declared mentally incompetent because she stopped funding his lifestyle." "Objection!" "Sustained," the judge said. "Mr. Weber, please stick to questions." Mr. Weber nodded and changed tactics. "Mr. Richter, when was the last time you visited your mother without asking for money?" Silence. "When was the last time you called her just to see how she was doing?" More silence. "When was the last time you told your mother you loved her without following it with a request for financial assistance?" Max stared at the floor. "I don't remember." "You don't remember, but you claim to love her." "I do love her." "Then why wasn't she invited to your wedding?" The question landed like a bomb. The courtroom went still. Max's face drained of color. It was a small ceremony. Your wife's parents were there. Her siblings were there. Friends were there. Photographs on social media show at least 20 people. But your own mother, the woman who paid for the wedding dress, who contributed to the rings, who had been supporting you financially for years, was not invited. Max opened his mouth, but no words came out. When your mother asked about the wedding, what did your wife tell her? I don't remember exactly. Allow me to refresh your memory. Your wife said, and I quote, "We only invited special people." Mr. Weber let the words hang in the air. Your mother wasn't special enough to attend your wedding, but she was special enough to pay for it. That's not what happened. Then what did happen, Mr. Richter? Explain to the court why a woman who gave you everything, her money, her time, her love, was excluded from the most important day of your life. Max's voice cracked. We thought it would be simpler to exclude the person financing your existence, simpler to humiliate the woman who sacrificed her retirement savings so you could live comfortably. Objection! Dr. Fisher shouted. Counsel is testifying. Withdrawn, Mr. Weber said calmly. I have no further questions. Max stepped down from the witness stand, his face ashen. For one moment, one brief, painful moment, our eyes met, and I saw something there I hadn't expected. Shame. Deep, undeniable shame. But shame wasn't enough. Shame didn't erase 3 years of exploitation. Shame didn't undo the humiliation of being called not special. Shame didn't give me back the $33,000 I had wasted on people who saw me as nothing more than a source of income. The trial continued. Dr. Lehman, The psychiatrist who had written a report suggesting I was mentally declining took the stand. His testimony was clinical, detached, professional. He spoke of concerning patterns and potential cognitive issues and the need for protective oversight. But when Mr. Weber cross-examined him, the facade crumbled. "Dr. Lehman, how many times did you personally examine Mrs. Richter?" "I reviewed the documentation provided by the family." "That wasn't my question. How many times did you personally examine her?" The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't examine her directly." "So your professional opinion about her mental state is based entirely on information provided by the people trying to take control of her finances?" "The documentation was comprehensive." "Did you speak with her neighbors, her friends, her primary care physician, her pharmacist?" "I relied on the family's account." "The family that stands to gain control of her assets if she's declared incompetent?" Dr. Lehman's credibility evaporated before the court's eyes. Then it was our turn to present evidence. Mr. Weber called Dr. Moore, the psychiatrist who had actually examined me. Her testimony was devastating to Max and Lena's case. "I conducted a comprehensive cognitive evaluation of Mrs. Richter," she stated. "Her results were excellent, above average for her age group. She demonstrated exceptional memory, clear reasoning, and complete understanding of her financial situation." "In your professional opinion," Mr. Weber asked, "is there any indication of mental incompetence?" "None whatsoever. Mrs. Richter is one of the sharpest 71-year-olds I've encountered. If anything, her decision to establish boundaries with family members who are exploiting her indicates sound judgment, not impaired judgment." Eleanor testified next, then Maria, then Carmen, then Alfreda. One by one, my new friends described the woman they had come to know over the past months, clear-minded, independent, capable, and finally free. Mr. Klein from the bank testified about my impeccable financial management. Mr. Green, the pharmacist, explained how he had been manipulated into signing a misleading statement. Even Cynthia from the beauty salon spoke about my transformation from a tired, burdened woman to someone vibrant and alive. Finally, it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand on legs that felt like they might give out. But when I sat down and looked at the judge, something steadied inside me. I had survived losing my husband. I had survived raising my son alone. I had survived years of being exploited and humiliated. I would survive this too. Mr. Weber guided me through my testimony gently but thoroughly. I told the court everything. The $33,000. The wedding I wasn't invited to. The constant request for money. The violation of my privacy. The threats. When I finished, I felt lighter than I had in years. The truth was finally out. Then Dr. Fisher stood up for cross-examination. His eyes were sharp, calculating. He was looking for any crack in my composure. "Mrs. Richter," he began, "isn't it true that you become isolated from your family?" "I've established boundaries with people who are exploiting me." I corrected. "That's not isolation. That's self-preservation." "Isn't it true that you surrounded yourself with strangers who may be influencing your decisions?" "The women you call strangers are friends who have shown me more genuine care in 2 months than my son and daughter-in-law showed in 3 years." "Isn't it possible that your sudden change in behavior indicates confusion rather than clarity?" I looked directly at him. "Dr. Fisher, I am not confused. I am awake. For the first time in years, I can see clearly. And what I see is 2 adults who treated me like an ATM, who excluded me from their lives while taking my money, and who are now trying to steal my freedom because I stopped funding their lifestyle." Dr. Fisher pressed on, but I didn't waver. Every question he asked, I answered with calm precision. Every trap he set, I avoided. When I stepped down from the witness stand, I knew I had done everything I could. The rest was up to Judge Miller. He announced he would retire to deliberate. "Court will reconvene in 2 hours, he said. Those 2 hours were the longest of my life. I sat in the hallway with Mr. Weber, Eleanor, and my friends. They held my hands. They whispered encouragement. They reminded me that no matter what happened, I had already won by standing up for myself. But deep inside, I was terrified. What if the judge believed Max and Lena? What if I lost everything? What if I spent my final years under the control of people who saw me as nothing more than a checkbook? When the bailiff finally called us back into the courtroom, my heart was pounding so hard I could barely breathe. We all stood as Judge Miller entered. His expression was unreadable. He sat down, shuffled some papers, cleared his throat, and then he began to speak. The words that came next would determine the rest of my life. The courtroom was silent, so silent I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Judge Miller looked at the papers before him, then raised his eyes to address the room. After reviewing all evidence presented in this case, he began, his voice measured and deliberate. And after carefully observing the testimony of all witnesses, this court has reached a decision. I gripped the edge of my seat. Mr. Weber placed a steadying hand on my arm. Across the aisle, I could see Lena leaning forward, her face tense with anticipation. Max stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The petitioners, Judge Miller continued, have alleged that Mrs. Renata Richter is mentally incompetent and requires legal guardianship to manage her affairs. He paused. This court finds no credible evidence to support that claim. A wave of relief washed over me so powerful, I thought I might collapse. But the judge wasn't finished. The professional psychiatric evaluation conducted by Dr. Moore demonstrates that Mrs. Richter possesses exceptional cognitive function for her age. Her memory is intact. Her reasoning is sound. Her understanding of her financial situation is complete and accurate. He looked directly at Max and Lena. What this court does find credible is evidence of a pattern of financial exploitation. Lena's face went pale. For 3 years, Judge Miller continued, Mrs. Richter provided substantial financial support to her adult son and daughter-in-law. Over $33,000 in rent payments, household expenses, gifts, and emergency assistance. He shook his head slowly. This support was not reciprocated with respect, gratitude, or even basic human decency. Instead, Mrs. Richter was excluded from her own son's wedding. She was told she wasn't special enough to attend. And when she finally chose to stop funding the lifestyle of 2 capable adults, she was subjected to harassment, manipulation, and ultimately this lawsuit. The judge's voice grew stern. The petitioner's own testimony revealed their true motivation. When Mrs. Schuster stated that everything will belong to us one day anyway, she revealed the heart of this matter. This is not a case of concerned family members seeking to protect a vulnerable elder. He leaned forward. This is a case of greedy individuals attempting to use the legal system to gain premature access to an inheritance they feel entitled to. I heard Lena gasp. Dr. Fisher was scribbling notes furiously, his face flushed with defeat. Therefore, Judge Miller announced, the petition for guardianship is denied in its entirety. Tears streamed down my face. But the judge still wasn't finished. Furthermore, this court is deeply troubled by the tactics employed by the petitioners. Entering Mrs. Richter's home without permission, reviewing her private documents without consent, manipulating third parties into signing misleading statements, filing a frivolous lawsuit designed to intimidate and control. He looked at Max and Lena with unmistakable disapproval. This court hereby issues a permanent restraining order. Mr. Max Richter and Mrs. Lena Schuster are prohibited from approaching Mrs. Richter's residence, contacting her by phone or electronic means, or attempting any further legal action regarding her competency or finances. Max's head dropped into his hands. Lena sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. Any violation of this order, the judge continued, will result in immediate arrest and criminal prosecution. He gathered his papers. Additionally, this court is referring this case to the district attorney's office for investigation of potential elder abuse charges. Dr. Fisher stood abruptly. Your Honor, Your clients, Judge Miller interrupted, have wasted this court's time with a meritless lawsuit driven by greed. I suggest they use their remaining resources to find employment rather than legal schemes. He struck his gavel. Case dismissed. The sound of that gavel was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. I sat motionless for a moment, unable to fully process what had just happened. I had won. Not just a lawsuit. I had won my freedom, my dignity, my life. Mr. Weber shook my hand warmly. Congratulations, Renata. Justice was served today. Eleanor rushed forward and embraced me tightly. You did it, she whispered. You really did it. Maria, Carmen, and Alfreda surrounded me with hugs and tears and laughter. Cynthia was crying. Even Mr. Klein from the bank had come to witness the verdict. He gave me a respectful nod from across the room. As the courtroom emptied, I looked toward where Max and Lena had been sitting. They were gone, slipped out through a side door, unable to face me after their humiliating defeat. Part of me, a small, stubborn part that still remembered the little boy who used to hold my hand, felt a pang of sadness, but it passed quickly, because I had finally learned something that took me 71 years to understand. Love that must be purchased is not love at all. It's a transaction, and I was done making payments. 3 months after the trial, I sold my house. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. I moved to a beautiful apartment near the city center, with large windows that let in golden afternoon light and a balcony where I could watch the sunset. I donated a significant portion of my savings to organizations that protect elderly people from family abuse. It felt right. My suffering would help prevent someone else's. With the rest of my money, I began living a life I had always postponed. I traveled through Europe, something I had dreamed of for decades but never allowed myself because every spare dollar went to Max and Lena. I visited Paris, Rome, Vienna, Barcelona. I stood beneath the Eiffel Tower and wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming joy of finally being free. I took art classes and discovered I still had talent I had buried for years. I joined volunteer groups and made friends with people who value me for who I was, not what I could give them. I learned to cook new dishes, read books I had been meaning to read, watched sunrises and sunsets without worrying about anyone else's problems. For the first time in my adult life, I was my own first priority, and it was wonderful. I heard news of Max and Lena occasionally, through mutual acquaintances, through the grapevine. They had been forced to move to a smaller apartment when they couldn't afford rent. Lena had finally gotten a job, her first real job in years. Max was working full-time now, no longer able to coast on his mother's generosity. Part of me hoped the struggle would teach them what my love never could: the value of hard work, the importance of independence, the meaning of genuine respect. Part of me knew it probably wouldn't. Some people never learn. But that was no longer my concern. I had spent 35 years trying to teach Max through giving. Perhaps life would teach him through taking. One evening, 6 months after the trial, I was sitting on my balcony watching the stars. They seemed brighter than ever. Or perhaps I was finally seeing them clearly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Mom. Max's voice. Tentative, uncertain, nothing like the arrogant man who had testified against me in court. I said nothing. Mom, I know you probably don't want to talk to me, and I understand, but I just wanted to say... He paused. I'm sorry. 2 words. Such small words. Such enormous weight. I'm sorry for everything, he continued. For taking you for granted. For treating you like you owed me something. For the wedding, for the lawsuit, for all of it. I listened in silence. Lena and I were not together anymore. She left when the money ran out. Turns out I wasn't that special to her either. Despite everything, a small part of my heart ached for him. I've been working, really working. For the first time in my life, I'm paying my own bills. And it's hard, Mom, really hard. But it's also... He struggled for words. It's also kind of good. I don't know how to explain it. I feel like I'm finally become the person you always wanted me to be. I remain silent. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand. I understand what I did. I understand what I lost. His voice cracked. I lost the only person who ever really loved me. And I threw that love away for money. Tears rolled down my cheeks. Mom, are you there? I took a deep breath. I'm here, Max. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was filled with years of pain, years of disappointment, years of love that had been twisted and exploited and nearly destroyed. Max, I finally said, I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you. What you did, what you tried to do, it broke something inside me. I know. Let me finish. You broke my trust. You broke my heart. You made me question whether my entire life as a mother had been a waste. I heard him crying on the other end of the line. But I'm also learning, I continued, that holding on to anger only hurts me. So I'm not going to hate you, Max. I refuse to let you have that power over me anymore. Does that mean... It means I'm willing to talk. Slowly. Carefully. No money. No expectations. Just talking. That's more than I deserve. Yes, I agreed. It is... We talked for another hour that night. About his job. About his small apartment. About the lessons he was finally learning. It wasn't reconciliation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a beginning. A tiny crack in the wall I had built around my heart. Some nights, when I sit on my balcony looking at the stars, I think about the woman I was a year ago. Frightened. Manipulated. Believing she had to buy love because she wasn't worthy of receiving it freely. That woman is gone now. In her place stands someone new. Someone who knows that true love can never be purchased. Someone who understands that freedom is never too expensive. Someone who learned, after 71 years on this earth, the most important lesson of all. The most important person you have to love and protect is yourself. My name is Renata Richter. I am 72 years old. I survived the betrayal of my own son. I fought for my freedom in a court of law. I won. And now, finally, I am living the life I always deserved. If my story touched you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe someone who is being taken advantage of by family. Maybe someone who has forgotten their own worth. Maybe someone who needs permission to say no. Tell them Renata's story. Tell them that it's never too late to reclaim your life. Tell them that freedom is possible. And tell them that they are special, not because of what they give, but because of who they are. Now I want to hear from you. What would you do in my situation? Would you have cut off the money sooner? Would you have forgiven Max? Would you have fought back the way I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories like this. There are many more waiting for you. Until next time, with heartfelt greetings. This is Renata signing off.